Welcome to FYI. I'm Barry ZeVAN, and my guests today are from Friendship Force. And they're going to explain what Friendship Force is. Rita A is the president, and Jane Bardon, the vice president. Thanks so much for being here. And I am very proud to say I've just been made a member. This is not a prerequisite for them being on the show, but I am delighted that they're here, and it's great to be a part of this. We'll explain what Friendship Force is, you will explain, but I want to get your backgrounds. First of all, Jane, what's your background?
Well, I've always been interested in technical things. So when I graduated from high school, I went to engineering school. And when I graduated, I became a statistician in a medical research lab at the university. Then I took a break. It was kind of a long break because I fit 6 kids in there, and went back to university and working in the library system, taking care of their computers.
And that was the University of Minnesota.
University
right?
of Minnesota, yes.
This is seen on YouTube thanks to CCX Media, so people watching in France or South Africa will say, what university was that?
Yeah, well, I guess there are others.
Yes, there are. And then Rita, your background, please.
My degree program was in nutrition, graduate of the University of Minnesota, and I've stayed in the cities for all of my life, but I did some work in corporate America. I worked at General Mills, and then the last 20 years of my life I worked at the Minnesota Department of Health. In particular, the last few years that I was there, I am retired now, I worked on getting a research-based diabetes prevention program up and running, and it was quite successful. And I just see now that Medicare has taken it on and is offering it to seniors. So it has been a while in the development, but it's fun to see that it's working and it's helping people with pre-diabetes prevent getting diabetes.
Well, it's wonderful, and of course, I have type 2 diabetes, as we had mentioned before, but privately we had mentioned it, but it seems to be the ailment of everyone almost. They either have type 2 or type 1. You must be very proud of your achievement.
Well, I am. I didn't think about it until I saw that article, and I go like, yeah, it was, took us a little bit of effort to make it agreeable to people that they would actually follow a 12-week program of diet and exercising and losing weight. But people are doing it, and it makes a difference if they follow it.
Maybe a stupid question. They always say there are no stupid questions, but for me, that doesn't apply. What about type 2 diabetes, especially? Is there a cure?
Well, unless they came up with one while I was sleeping, I don't believe so, but there is that control, and definitely, as I talked about the prediabetes, it's prevention of type 2. The juvenile onset or type 1 diabetes is another mechanism, but I think it's control is a lot of what they have to do.
Okay.
As you probably know, and you follow, I'm sure, a strict regimen.
Oh yes, I take a lot of pills.
That too.
On the tech side, Jane, it's phenomenal to me because some people watching this program are saying, she's a techie? Really? Like being a Trekkie or whatever.
Sort of.
But it's fascinating to me because technology, of course, has, in my opinion, it's almost overtaken the world with the internet and everything else. Were you instrumental in helping that move along in some way or another?
I think we all were. When I first started at the University of Minnesota as a techie, we were doing beta testing, which means an initial program that was passed around among techies around the world that we would test, and one of them was the beginning of the internet.
Wow.
There were just programs we used. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It'll come to me. Mosaic was one of it. It was called Mosaic. And it would come in just, if hard to remember them, but just a floppy disk in a little square cardboard.
I remember those.
And you'd stick that in, and you'd look at this program and say, nah, this isn't as good as the last one, or this is better. And we gradually moved on, and by the time I retired, the internet was even open to the public. That was one of my big surprises. I'd been exchanging emails, programs with people around the world, and then all of a sudden I got an ad, and it was out commercially, and that was a big surprise.
Do you think it's gone? Nothing, I guess, has ever gone as far as it can go. But do you think we're close to no more inventions, or what do you think?
Nowhere close.
Nowhere close.
Nowhere close. It'll just keep going.
Wow, incredible. You've had quite a life. Friendship Force. Want to find out, of course, what it's all about. And I know even from a pre-conversation that you've worked in many parts of the world.
I have, yes.
Yeah. So we're going to learn more about that in a moment, but I want to find out from Rita first, what is Friendship Force?
Friendship Force is maybe the best kept secret that those of us who participate in it realize it's just a great way to make friends around the world and to use those friendships to promote peace. It's a nonprofit organization that has been around for 40 years, and it was founded by a man named Wayne Smith in 1977, introduced in March of 1907 by Jimmy Carter to governors from around the state that had gathered in the White House. And he charged those governors to go back and find somebody that would lead up the movement in each state. The concept was, if you know people in countries, if you've stayed in their homes, because it is an in-home exchange program, if you've eaten with them, shared meals in their homes, and learned about their culture, you're less likely to want to see your country go to war with them. That was sort of the basic premise. And I believe that's true, as now there are 63 countries represented in Friendship Force International, probably 1,500 members currently, and they've been running exchanges since 1977. The first ones were a plane full of people. So like 250 people would go to Berlin, and 250 people from Berlin would come back to Minnesota. And in 5 years, they kind of played with that. And eventually they got groups of about 40 and then cut it back to about 20, which actually is a little more intimate than 250 people traveling together. But some wonderful stories. The Friendship Force promotes the idea of exploring new countries and cultures, understanding the people and their cultures and what makes them tick, and then serving the greater good of peace and global peace for all kind.
That's wonderful. I should have done more of my homework, because Vice President Mondale, I'm very happy to say, has been a longtime friend to me. I emceed his inaugural banquet in Washington in 1977, but and kindly he endorsed my book on the back and has been on this program.
Wonderful.
He's a friend of this program, and I assume that he also was very supportive since President Carter endorsed it. Was Vice President Mondale involved in it?
Do you know that? I know Rosalind Carter was the honorable chairperson for that, but many years, until 2002. So I do believe Mondale was, but I don't have any personal information on that.
Okay, just curious.
No, I have no idea.
Yeah. So Jane, some of the countries in which you've done some work?
Well, one of the first countries I actually worked in was Morocco, where I was sent by the University of Minnesota. and through USAID, a U.S. government program, to set up some computers in a library,
Oh, wow.
which was kind of fun. It's a Muslim country, very interesting. The young women dress like we would here. The older women tended to wear headscarves. The real old ones were pretty much veiled. So I walked into this library, and all these guys were standing around looking at the boxes. And my first impulse was to just tell them what to do, and that's what I did. And that worked out very well.
Well, that's good.
And they were not used to working with a woman, but they got used to it.
Marvelous. And Morocco has a Minnesota connection too. I'm sure you knew for quite at least 2 or 3 years, Sam Kaplan was the ambassador from
No, I didn't know
from the
that.
United States to Morocco under President Obama. And Sam and his wife Sylvia are back here, living here in Minneapolis. But I asked him a couple times how it was, because it was the unusual country that it was, and he said they enjoyed it quite a bit.
Well, one of our first U.S. treaties was with Morocco when we first became a nation. So contact goes way back. And my connection was through the Agriculture Veterinary College at the University of Minnesota and a similar institution in Morocco.
Right. We've both shared South Africa as places where we've either worked or visited. What was your opinion of South Africa? I loved it.
Well, I've been there a couple times, and I certainly enjoyed it. I saw quite a difference between the first time and the second. It was, I had the feeling, in at least parts of it, that when I saw the original South Africans, that they really felt it was their country.
The Afrikaners, yeah.
The Afrikaners. Now I was thinking of the black population, and and meeting them, their sense of this being their country, and an increased sense of dignity.
Yeah. Well, Nelson Mandela certainly changed all that.
Yes, yes.
Sure.
We visited where he was imprisoned.
Robben Island, yeah. What came to you when you were there? It must have been quite a chilling experience.
I don't think so. I'd read so much about it that it was about like I expected.
Okay. So Rita, what about you? As far as Friendship Force, what countries have you visited?
Well, I had my first visit 10 years ago when I went to Japan, and Jane and her husband Jack were part of a group of about 24 people who went for 2 weeks. Had a wonderful experience in Koriyama in in the Fukushima precinct, and then in Nagoya in the Aichi precinct in the southern part. So we experienced agricultural and urban areas, but it was the homestays that I really liked. First night in, we were staying in a traditional Japanese home, and we slept on mats and picked them up each morning. We did some work. I had previously brought in some examples of, we were interested in calligraphy, so one of the friends of one of the couples we stayed with came in and taught us to do some calligraphy, and then gave us what it was supposed to look like, since our technique wasn't quite up to the Japanese standards, so they gave us a nice gift of that. I've also been to Tbilisi, the Republic of Georgia, and did some touring in that area, led a trip to Australia and New Zealand, been to Canada, and most recently went to Costa Rica with our group. So I've enjoyed traveling with the group.
That's fun. I did briefly some work for President Monge down in Costa Rica, and the big thing before I had met him was Henry Kissinger was staying in the same hotel, but during my days in Washington, D.C., he used to visit my friend Ted Koppel, so I got to see him once or twice before the Costa Rican adventure. Beautiful country. A lot of people don't know their coffee is the best in the world, but it's
Thought so.
it's such a small country, they can't export too much of it. Tbilisi, that's fascinating to me. What was their feeling toward Westerners?
Well, they were opening up and welcoming us. They have previously come out of the Russian rule, so they had made English their primary language instead of Russian. People were eager to talk to us and, you know, increase their English skills. In fact, there were a number of people that, you know, would come for a year, teach in the schools, stay in homes, and come back. There was a lot of reconstruction going on because there had been some post-invasion a few years prior, and there's just a lot of things needed to be rebuilt. One of the cultural experiences I remember was going to a festival, and it was really cool because they were promoting the different songs and dances of the different villages, the mountain villages, and they were having this festival and contest. And it was a very few elders teaching the young, so those like 16 to 24, and they were actually having to teach them the culture because it had been suppressed for so long.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that, and it was just some beautiful music and a very energetic population. The people were just great to meet.
I would imagine one of the benefits of Friendship Force when you go to these countries is to experience the different foods. Any food stories, possibly, Jane?
Well, sort of. A couple of the more interesting Friendship Force trips I've gone on, one was going to Russia to teach English in middle school.
Wow.
And we all arrived. It was a group that was started by a group in Oregon, and there were people from various states, maybe 20 of us, maybe 30. It was a while ago. So we were all assigned schools and classrooms to teach. So and as it ended up, we all made the same decision, because when we got to the classrooms, the way the students had learned was by learning by rote, memorizing everything. A teacher asks a student a question, they stand up by their desk, their arms straight down, and they recite off paragraphs. So with a few hours of that, we all did the same thing. We all threw the textbooks away and went into just normal discussions like we would in an American schoolroom.
Well, that's wonderful.
So that was quite an experience. But one of the things I remember the most, and I thought of it because you mentioned food, is we stayed with a host family with two young boys. They were 10 and 12 at the time. And we went out for dinner. And for reasons I never understood, the family ordered dinner for the two boys and for us. And they didn't eat. And they said, well, we've eaten already. Well, this was one of the things that happens when you're in a foreign country. Things happen that you never figure out. We never figured that one out. I have no idea. But then there was dancing after dinner. So I danced with the 10-year-old, and the 12-year-old. And later, the 10-year-old at the table lifts his glass and gave a toast to friendship between Russia and the United States.
Oh, wonderful.
That was the highlight.
Oh, I guess that's fantastic.
And as often happens in Friendship Force, in the last year, I've started to get emails from this young man who's now in his early 20s.
Oh, that's outstanding. And that would have been during either part of the Cold War or just the Cold War?
It was right
just
at
ended?
the end, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's marvelous. Well, with all that's going on these days, we hope that the friendships continue.
Well, that's a common response that we've gotten around the world, and my husband and I have traveled to quite a few countries. You get a chance to talk to just ordinary folks. They always say, well, you know, our country, you know, we're fine with this country or that country. Chile and Argentina are fine with each other. It's our governments.
Mm-hmm.
But the people were fine, and we found that everywhere.
I've always felt, and maybe it's a good fit for Friendship Force, that we're all just human beings.
That's right. It really
Exactly.
comes out.
We want to survive as peacefully as possible and happily as
Yeah,
possible. And
I mean, we stay with families, and they want the same thing I do, as my family does, to just raise your family in peace.
So
It's really very
strangers
simple.
becoming friends, and it starts before you even get to the country. Now it's email, but a long time ago, I think it was probably postal mail. But communications with the people you're going to stay with, and then it continues. A lot of, like you said, you're getting correspondence, and we hear stories as we go into our 40th anniversary about, well, I'm still communicating with the people, that I met 40 years ago, and here's a Christmas card I got this year. And, they're special friendships.
absolutely. As I sometimes do, I insert some personal thoughts germane to the subject. In the old days, we had pen pals.
Yeah.
And back in the 1950s, I had a pen pal. My first pen pal was in Liverpool, England. And his name was Roy Marsden. And his father was the headmaster at the Liverpool Institute in Birkenhead across the Mersey River, which of course became famous with the Beatles, river across the Mersey. But anyway, I happened years later, many years later, like this was about 20 years ago, to be in London on business and with some friends. And I walked down the street, and I had heard that Roy had become a flying officer for the RAF. And here was a Royal Air Force building. And I thought, I wonder if they know where he is. And by golly, I found out that he had moved to Southampton. And I actually got the phone number and I called, but there was no answer, unfortunately. That's as close as I got to continuing the relationship that had started in 1950, and here it was 2000 and whatever. And it is wonderful, and some people, as you know, and I guess this dovetails into what Friendship Force does, and part of it anyway, the fact that these relationships can last forever.
Right.
I keep in touch with two people now who with whom I grew up. I've never grown up, but but with whom I had my childhood in Pittsburgh, and know exactly where they are. We communicate by email now and telephone. And what's amazing to me, and maybe it's part of Friendship Force's psyche too, is you do remember all the way back. You remember how it started. You want to keep track of these people. You start caring about each other
Exactly.
because they're part of your history. So sorry for
That's
going
fine.
on here.
And even if you don't make that contact when you leave that voicemail, in your heart, you're still connected
Oh yeah,
because you went there.
absolutely. And some people, instead of regarding it like my book, I hate to keep referring to that, but about my memory. I have an eidetic memory. I remember everything. But by the same token, I'm not exclusive in that club, because there are people who I knew back in my teenage years and whatever who do remember as much. They do remember as much. So I can't brag too much about that, nor would I want to. So what Jane would be, what would you consider, say, the best experience within Friendship Force as far as countries where you've been?
I think Siberia
Oh,
was
wow.
the most interesting.
Wow. Please tell us.
It was with, as Friendship Force members, you can travel with your own club, like our club here in Minnesota, or you can travel with a club from somewhere else. Like when I went to Russia, that was a different club. When I went to Siberia, we traveled with a group from Denver, Colorado. And before we went, we were interviewed by phone to see if we were tough enough for this.
Yeah.
Which it was kind of a joke, really, because we'd been a lot of rough places. So that made it more intriguing. And we ended up taking the train from the Siberian Railroad from Vladivostok in Russia into Irkutsk in Siberia. And just the train itself was fascinating. You could sit by the window and watch Russia go by.
Wow.
But the surprise to me was how much it looked like Minnesota.
Oh, really?
I could identify a lot of the vegetation, and afterwards I looked at a globe and I found there was sort of a circle around the top of the globe at this latitude of 45 degrees, where the vegetation was pretty much the same.
Oh my goodness, that's fantastic. I envisioned Dr. Zhivago. When I think, were you there in the winter time? Or
no, it was summertime.
Oh, good.
It was summertime.
I'm glad for that, for you.
And similarly, we stayed with families, which was a different experience.
Do they speak English?
Enough.
Enough English?
Enough English to get by. My husband and I have learned to get by with very little English. He's good at learning languages, so if we're going to Russia, say he'll learn some Russian, and then he'll mix it up with German, Italian, whatever else he learned last time, but he's very successful at communicating with people.
Marvelous. How about you, Rita, and best experience?
Best
possible?
experience. Well, they're all so good, so I'm trying to think of something. I'm just going to go back to the food question, and
Okay.
I'm remembering
We have about a minute and a half. You go ahead.
it just, particularly in Japan, we do a lot of potlucks in Friendship Force. I mean, that's just seems to be a way that we share our foods. So some of the foods we had in Japan were not things that I was used to seeing and eating, and I'd put them on my plate and everybody would be looking and they'd watch while I would eat it, and I did quite well. So I think just learning, to be open to try new things, it's part of my experience.
Was sushi part of it? Or?
No, that they didn't at the potluck that I remember.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't remember sushi.
Good. I can't handle it.
I had octopus, like just the whole thing
Oh my goodness.
coming out of a crock pot. So like, okay.
I remember the food on that trip too.
Wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough, and I hope this will help people. Yeah. How does someone join Friendship Force? Or is there a website?
There is a website.
What is it?
It's www.friendshipforcetwincities.org.
Terrific. Well, I hope that people will look it up and join.
That's the best way to find us right now.
We're open to people that just want to be with people, and we'd love to have them come.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shameless plug time. My book is available on Amazon, and it's full of surprises. It is not exactly what you think it might be. So, hopefully, you will you will take the time to look on Amazon and maybe even buy it if you wish. See you next time. Thanks.